You know, in South Africa, I've noticed a pattern is like many people are starting to become fat. They're starting to become obese. And I think it's the food. I think it's the medications people are forced to take. And I also think for women, it's a lot more prevention pills, umjovo. There's a lot that comes with it. But it's also affecting the kids. Kids 5 years below. There's a study that was done. Kids are no more growing taller anymore. They are becoming more short because of the food. Kids are no more growing up in a rate whereby like it's their body. They are becoming fat. Why is it so? Why? If you want to know more, I have an interesting interview that was done at News Africa. This is for educational purposes. I hope you guys listen and learn something from this video, because this is very interesting and it concerns the future of your child. Take a listen.
And unfortunately in our country, Naledi, our children are too short and they are too fat, meaning that we have a problem both with shortness, as in stunting, but also overweight and obesity in young children. And I'm talking particularly for children under the age of 5 years.
And, you know, too short and too big. And I think that's an interesting point, because one of the questions we're asking our viewers today is why we have perhaps a shortage of food in our country, why not everyone has enough to eat. And I think it's something to be said when you said, okay, we do have stunting, which is children that aren't receiving enough nutrition to grow at the pace that they should be. But also you say our children are obese or overweight, which is quite the conundrum, right? How do you have a food scarcity issue and then have children that are seemingly overweight?
A very interesting question, and I'm glad you're giving me the opportunity to clarify that. So both of these indicators, if you are too short and you are overweight, we call this malnutrition, meaning a poor state of nutrition. So shortness is too little calories to give you the height measurement. Overweight is too much of the kind of calories that gives your body mass, but doesn't give your body health. So we do not see overnutrition in the sense of overweight as being good nutrition. It actually is an indicator of bad nutrition. It tells us that our children are eating calories without eating good nutrition, and that's what we call our vitamins, our minerals, and the kinds of foods, the healthy kinds of foods that give you both length and healthy weight.
Yeah, so then that goes back to the issue of food shortage, right? Because then we're saying, all right, so those that do have food are just having too many carbohydrates and they're not getting nutrition. But how accessible and affordable is nutritious food in South Africa, particularly in the most vulnerable areas? I mean, how easy is it to get, you know, a well-rounded plate of food in our country?
Naledi, I am really sad to talk about malnutrition in the context of South Africa, because South Africa is a middle income country. That means we have enough money. We have enough food in our country as a national food issue. We produce enough to actually export. What we have in South Africa is food inaccessibility, because we do not have economic access, meaning that people don't have enough money in their households to be able to buy that food. And that is driven by two big issues. One is unemployment, and we know our unemployment rates are very, very high. I think way above 35%, which makes us one of the countries with the highest unemployment rates in the world. And secondly, our cost of the food basket. And we've seen year on year, the food basket has become more and more unaffordable for our people. And what is happening with children is that children are getting foods that are cheap, highly processed, high in energy, high in fat, high in salt, and this is unacceptable for the growth of children in South Africa. So we are not only talking about the choices that mothers and caregivers are making in the household, we're also talking about macro policies that don't protect children, and South Africa is not doing enough.
Yeah, I'm keen to pick your brain on some of the latest developments that we've been looking at in Naledi in Soweto, for instance. A heartbreaking situation. We've seen 6 children losing their lives after buying snacks from a spaza shop. In another part of the country, we saw 70 pupils hospitalized after consuming food. And then we're covering this morning the story of over 40 children that was hospitalized yesterday from buying chocolates at a school. What do you make of what we're seeing there and the advent of food poisoning in our communities and in our schools, particularly where it impacts children?
I want to raise two issues that are pertinent. The first is around the quality of food. And food should never be considered poison. Food is considered poison when it's contaminated. So obviously, as the investigations unfold, we'll begin to understand what was exactly in those products that made them poisonous for the children. But we also know that in households, we can do a lot to protect our food sources. A lot of the poisoning that is happening in young children is when we do not protect our food from contaminants like rat poisoning, like cockroach powders. And these are becoming stored in the same areas in households that don't protect the food and then become vehicles of poisoning. The second one, especially with the matric camp, that had a lot to do with how food is prepared and how food is kept safe. We know that food, especially in this heat, now our temperatures are rising, it's summertime, you make food, you keep it at room temperature, it is a recipe for disaster, and it can be hugely fatal for young children because young children don't need to consume a lot to be able to be poisoned. And so we really need to get a handle on our food hygiene and our food safety practices, firstly. And then secondly, we need to call on government and all other agencies that can support and protect the quality of food so that we don't have contaminated food and these things called fake foods, because that isn't food.
Yeah. Let's talk about what is best and what can be done for our children. Where mothers are concerned, just how much control they have in those first 1,000 days of a child's life. We're told over and over again that they are so critical to the development of a child. And I know that you're quite the advocate for breastfeeding. Let's talk a little bit about whether or not we're seeing a drop in women breastfeeding. And really what needs to be done then to encourage that. And is there a nutrition, I suppose, even shortfall where breastfeeding is concerned? If mom isn't healthy, then that becomes an issue as well.
Naledi, firstly, let me put it out there. The evidence globally and in South Africa, and we have to push the breastfeeding agenda because it's also what we call a food security issue for young children. If a mom can't buy food, at least she can put her child to the breast and she can feed her child. There is no reason why women cannot adequately breastfeed. There isn't a reason if you are overweight. There is this idea and there's these social, let me call them misinformation, miscommunication that says, if I'm unhealthy, my breast milk is unhealthy. That is not true. Your body will protect your child by making your breast milk optimal for your child. That's why breastfeeding is such an important strategy for us, both in South Africa and globally. So globally, we are not doing enough for breastfeeding, and we have a whole week dedicated to breastfeeding, as you know, in August. In South Africa, our real driver for mums not breastfeeding is because our mothers are separated from their children very early. We have separation of children in the hospital already. So when we separate babies and moms, then obviously they can't breastfeed, they can't do optimal breastfeeding, and that's where these formulas start stepping in. We have a lot of practices called top-up feeding. So the mom delivers in a hospital, they separate the mother and the baby, and then they tell the mom, your baby needs a top-up. That is unacceptable. That is a violation of children as well. And then secondly, our moms are unemployed. They are constantly looking for work. So you can't be home breastfeeding when you are struggling to put food on the table. Our mothers have other children to look after. So we don't have the protection. We need to start pushing for maternity protection for all mothers, not just mothers that are employed and in informal employment. We have mothers, the majority of our mothers are in informal employment.
Yeah.
And we still need to protect those mothers.
Yeah, thank you so much.